Welcome to our session where we're going to look at research, and we're going to look at a short word answer session here where you need to maximize your understanding. So quickly go through our lecture notes briefly. So we are going to start by learning what uh, research gaps are. So in research, we have what we call research gaps. So one of the reasons why we conduct research is to ensure that we fill in a certain gap in the body of knowledge. So a gap is simply an area where existing studies are insufficient. They're either outdated or they negate what is there. They are contrary or they're completely amiss. So understanding these different kinds of gaps will help researchers to identify where studies need to be fortified. So there are different types of research gaps emanating from the following. We have what we call knowledge gaps. This is a gap which exists when there's lack of understanding in a particular area or field. There's what we call a theoretical gap, where there are inconsistencies or limitations in the existing theories. And these will need refinement. Sometimes there are models that were erroneous, that were done by other people, but you need to correct them. So theoretical gap can exist in that instance. We also have other types of gaps that are there. These gaps could be methodological gaps. These ones come in when there are weaknesses in the methods that we use to conduct other empirical studies. So these methodological gaps are important to correct when a researcher feels something should have been done. So it happens prior studies with limitations in their design and their data collection methods and their analytical methods. So a new research might suggest a new improved method of doing to validate the results. We also have empirical gaps. These exist when there's a lack of evidence in testing some theoretical claims in the real world settings. So these theories might be popular but unproven or outside the controlled environment. So for instance, we have a leadership model that was developed in the US. Okay. It is not tested in Asian context. So you may want to have an empirical gap. So we also have other gaps like population gap, geographical gaps, conceptual gaps. These gaps, when dealing with population gaps, we're dealing with when you're dealing with a specific population, for instance, by age, ethnicity, um, geography, these ones are unrepresented or they're ignored in research. So you can have what we call a population gap. There are a lot of gaps. We also have geographical gap. This tends to be one gap where you concentrate in some regions whilst ignoring others. So geographical gap will offer space for research expansion. So you're just looking at researches to do with a certain region. We have conceptual gaps, we have evidence gaps, we have practical gaps. Conceptual gaps are gaps which come about when new ideas or technologies emerge, where the older ones might seem not to address the new phenomenon. So these are many types of gaps. I'll just concentrate on those few. We also talked about issues to do with we also talked about issues to do with research designs. So what is a research design? It's a blueprint that guides us on how we're going to conduct our research. So we have a mixed methods research, which combines both quantitative to do with numbers and statistics and qualitative to do with wording and meanings. So these approaches that are predominantly used under mixed methods, we have what we call the convergent parallel design, explanatory research design, we have the exploratory sequential design, we have the embedded research design. So I took you through the other class to learning how to align which design applies where. So when I'm dealing with our we are dealing with our convergent parallel design. We're looking at a scenario where we're going to collect qualitative and quantitative data at the same time. So this one analyzes them separately, but measures the result. So this is called a convergent parallel design. Convergent parallel design. We also have an explanatory sequential design. It initially starts with quantitative data collection analysis, then later on concludes with qualitative data to explain or build on aspects that quantitative data could not explain. So we call that, we call it that. Okay. Any questions so far before I proceed? Are we following?
Yes, we are following.
So the explanatory sequential design, I say it is a design where quantitative data is collected first, then qualitative follows after to elaborate more on the quantitative findings. An instance where you have a large-scale survey, it shows low employee engagement. Interviews would want now to explain why. The exploratory, explore means it's insufficient data. So it starts with qualitative data collection to explore the issue deeply. Then quantitative is then gathered, test or generalize the findings. So you see the opposite. One starts with quantitative, ends qualitative, and this one starts with qualitative and ends with quantitative. So exploratory starts with qualitative data to explore an issue deeply. Then quantitative is then gathered to test and generalize the findings. For instance, we're dealing with what? Focus groups. You identify a new shopping behavior. Then you conduct a survey to test them across the population. We also have an embedded design. Embedded design is used when we are dealing with um, quantitative or qualitative data. So this is nested within a larger design. So one type of data that supports or enriches the primary data method. We also have a multi-phase design. We also have a multi-phase design, which combines both sequential and or concurrent data collection. Multi-phase design. Rid of the multi-phase design. So basically, these are the prominent ones and mixed method. So we also explain the types that fall under. Okay, which designs fall under qualitative and which ones fall under quantitative?
Quantitative, we have, I think that's questionnaires. That's where you do questionnaires and interviews.
Okay, so quantitative, we have a number. The focus for, let's start with qualitative. Qualitative, we have a number. The focus for qualitative is what? On meanings and experiences or themes. So we talked about 5 research designs yesterday. I'll talk about any 4 today. So we have phenomenological, which talks about what? Experiences of individuals. Ethnographic, which talks about what? Cultures. Grounded theory, which develops a theory uh, in data collection from participants. We talked about case study. It's a qualitative design, which has a detailed study of a single case or small number of cases. We have a narrative research, which focuses on stories or personal accounts. We have action research, which is a collaborative problem-solving scenario. So these are the designs that fall under qualitative. We also have historical research, where we are dealing with past events. Under quantitative, there are quite a number. We talked about descriptive research, it's a quantitative element. We talked about correlation, which talks about what? Examining a relationship between two or more variables. Experimental, which tests causality. Quasi-experimental, which tests causal relationship without random assignment. We also talked about what? Cross-sectional design, which is data collected at a single point in time. Then longitudinal, it is collected over an extended period. So these are all under quantitative. Other quantitative research designs, you can have a comparative research design where you're comparing two groups, a survey research design where you're gathering information using questionnaires or interviews. So these are the types of research designs that we talked about. Then we also went ahead to talk about important aspects to do with validity. What did we say about validity? Yeah, both measuring what? What is validity about? What does validity measure?
Validity measures.
Accuracy of the test.
Okay.
Accuracy tools that are being measured.
So validity measures what? Accuracy. How accurate the tool is what? Is measuring what it's intended to measure. So we looked at the major types of validity. Okay, there are two there that we can see, but what other types of validity did we talk about that are there? Already. So we talked about construct validity. What does construct validity measure? Construct validity measures whether the tool that is under consideration measures the theoretical concept, which is a construct. Okay, construct validity is used to measure whether the tool truly measures what? The theoretical concept it's supposed to measure. For instance, if a questionnaire is supposed to measure self-esteem, construct validity will seek to do what? To ensure that the aspects that denote self-esteem are captured, right? Then we talked about so we also talked about the types of construct validity. There are two types of construct validity. There are two. We talked about convergent and discriminant validity. Okay, so under construct validity, we mentioned that construct validity is used to assess whether the tool truly measures the theoretical concept or construct supposed to measure. So subtypes are convergent, which measures what? That it should be related to what it's actually supposed to be related. Discriminant measures that the measures that should not be related or are not related. So there's discriminant and the convergent validity under the construct. Then we also talked about content validity. What is content validity? Content validity, from the term content, okay, it measures whether the instrument covers the entire range of aspects in the content, the concepts that are being studied. That is content validity. So content validity is used when we want to assess whether the instrument, like the questionnaire, covers all the aspects of the concept being studied. So if you're developing a math test, content validity assumes that you should cover relevant areas like algebra, geometry, arithmetic. All these should be covered, not just one part. So if you're looking at depression, it must ask questions to do with mood, sleep, appetite. So that is what the content validity assumes you must tackle. What other validity did we talk about?
Face validity.
Good. Face validity. What does face validity talk about? Face validity, it assesses whether the test appears on face value to measure what's supposed to measure. So face validity is actually one of the weakest forms, subjective. It's not statistically tested. So face validity is a basic kind of validity that is based on simple judgment by non-experts or experts. So a test that is labeled communication skills should include questions to do with speaking, writing, all right? Just by looking, face value, listening. So it would prove to have good face validity. Which other validity did we talk about? Criterion validity. So criterion validity, it measures how well one measure predicts an outcome based on another measure, criterion. So it checks if the test results correlate with the real world outcome. So we have subtypes of the concurrent validity and the predictive validity. All right. So criterion validity is one of the major types of validity because it is used when we want to measure how well a test matches or predicts the real world scenario. It checks if the test results are connected to the real outcomes. So that's concurrent. So the two types, we have concurrent validity, which agrees with something. It agrees that something is happening now. For instance, if you have a quick IQ test, it should match the official IQ results. Okay. Predictive validity is a test that can predict something, that something will happen later. For instance, if you have your GPA scores, they'll predict how well you're going to do at your final. So GPA, sometimes you can use this the school uses this validity test to assume why did this person fail when the CA was good. So that falls under what? Our predictive validity is able to tell you. So there are certain times in the school we agree to say, okay, with the performance, you got an A here. How did you get a D in there? So sometimes they'll use this to negate some results or give you a compassionate pass. Okay, concurrent is on the other hand, a test that agrees with something with something happening now. Okay, so you may have a quick IQ test should match the official IQ test. All right, so lastly, but not the least, we also talked about what? The quasi-experimental design. Okay, what's the difference between quasi and experimental design? What's the difference between experimental design and quasi-experimental design? Okay, now let's get to answering these questions quickly. So short word answer 20 marks. Question number A, enumerate the types of research gaps, 4 marks quickly.
Knowledge gaps, information gaps, methodological gaps. We have information gaps as well, and theoretical gaps.
Okay, can you explain any one
Theoretical.
you've explained? How does it arise?
For information gaps, how those gaps arise or what they are?
What they are, yeah.
Okay, information gaps is where the research you're conducting, and then you You're searching for information on the same research. It's got some gaps due to maybe technological advancements and other issues on the ground.
Okay. Question part B, what's the difference between quasi-experimental and experimental research design in quantitative research methodological approach? What are the difference between the two? Okay, part C, what are the various types of literature reviews that are done in research studies?
We have the empirical,
Yes.
theoretical,
Mhm.
Exploration.
We also have systematic.
There's some of the things I taught them in the previous class. So today I just didn't talk about everything. Those who were in the previous class. Part E, how is construct validity different from criterion validity? 4 marks.
for constructs, it measures how truly the theoretical contrast it claims to measure, how true it is. While for criterion, it is how well one measures or predicts an outcome based on another measure.
Okay. What are the others saying? Okay, what is the definition of a research design? What is the definition of a research design? What is a research design?
Okay. A research design is a blueprint of how we're going to conduct a research.
Yes, it's an overall plan, structure that will guide a research project. It's a blueprint. It will guide on how data will be collected, how data will be analyzed. Okay. Question number 2, list the types of research designs that we have.
We have quantitative, qualitative, and mixed research.
Okay.
Design.
And under each, any 4 under each.
Quantitative, we have cross-section, correlation, exploratory, and quals.
Quantitative, we have cross-section, correlation, quasi-experimental, experimental, longitudinal. And qualitative, we have what? Case study, narrative, grounded, ethnographic, research design. Okay. How about mixed? Under mixed, what research designs we talk about that fall under mixed methods?
And then next we have convergent parallel design, exploratory sequential.
Exploratory sequential and explanatory sequential.
Yes.
The multi-phase. Okay. Next question we had was differentiate quantitative from qualitative research design. Okay. We've answered this part, types of research design, differentiate these ones here. So the types, two types of mixed research, you've talked about them. What are the two types of mixed research?
Said embedded, explanatory, exploratory.
Okay. Then the difference between experimental and quasi-experimental. Or before we go there, the difference between quantitative and qualitative research design in terms of focus. Qualitative looks at words, meanings, and experiences, whereas quantitative looks at numbers, measures, and statistics. Data collection, the examples under qualitative are interviews, observations, open-ended surveys, whereas quantitative, we have surveys, experiments, and structured tools. Then goals, here is to understand deep meaning, here is to measure and analyze variables numerically. Then output, we have themes and patterns, here we have statistical results. Okay. And we also went to identify the two types of mixed methods and their content. The two types of mixed methods, we talked about what? The convergent, parallel, and explanatory sequential. So convergent, parallel, it collects both qualitative and quantitative at the same time, analyzes them separately, then compares and measures the results. Whereas explanatory sequential, it starts with collecting, analyzing quantitative data, then followed by qualitative data to explain the quantitative findings. All right? Remember this? Then the differences between experimental and quasi-experimental research design, it's mainly on a random assignment. So when you're dealing with experimental, in terms of group assignment, participants are randomly assigned to groups. Whereas quasi-experimental research design, there's no random assignment. Then in terms of control over variables, experimental research design has high control, whereas quasi, there is low control. Okay. Halfway together. So in these two contexts, when we are dealing with experimental, research design, here the researcher will randomly put people in different groups. For instance, if you flip a coin and you decide who goes to the treatment and who goes to the control group. So because when we have a control group, okay, there we can be very sure that changes that we see are caused by the experiment, not by outside things. Then in a quasi-experimental group, researchers do not randomly assign people to groups. They just use groups that are already existing, like 2 different classrooms or two different hospitals, since the groups are not randomly made with outside factors like background environment. So it's harder to be sure that the experiment alone caused this change. So you need to understand the concepts, okay? So that's the table that you're seeing there. Then lastly, but not the least, we talked about what? issues to do with validity. So talked about the 4 types of validity. What are the 4 types of validity that we talked about?
As contrast, criterion, validity,
So
Content validity.
test,
uh-huh.
and content.
So construct, it tests whether the test truly measures the concept it claims to measure. Content, whether the test covers all aspects of the concept. Criterion, how well the test matches and predicts the real world outcome. Then face validity, whether the test looks like it measures what it should on the surface. So these are what we're talking about. Okay. So I really need you to fortify your answers as you're answering these questions. In this course, you can flunk very, very, very well or pass very well, depending on what effort you put. So get to read everything unsparing. Don't specialize. All right? Don't specialize. So you can't afford to miss the 20 marks because these questions are also in the multiple choice compulsory questions. I think we did all these multiple choice questions, but since we're revising, I'll be using a circular method where I'll be going back and forth what we have done so that they stick in your heads. All right, so we end here.